Hi, Simon. Thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited to chat with you today. You and I have actually known each other for a few years now. We worked together for a couple of years at Shopify, and I always thought very highly of you in terms of the knowledge that you brought to the team and how you led people as well. So I'm just really excited to hear all about your story.
Yeah, thanks, Amia. Excited to chat with you. Great to talk again. It's been a while.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, like I said, we worked briefly together at Shopify. But I'd love to hear your full career journey from the point of, graduating from university to where you're at now.
Yeah, sure. So I actually started my career doing a few short-term stints for NGOs and nonprofits. So right when I first came out of university, I'm actually based in Ottawa, Canada. It's a government town, so there's a lot of NGOs and nonprofits here. So I spent, my first maybe year or so out of university working for both the Canadian Organic Trade Association as well as the Parkinson's Society of Canada, doing general marketing. So when you work for an NGO or a nonprofit, generally you're the one person doing marketing in the whole team. And it is like an extreme version of a bootstrapped startup where you don't have a lot of budget and everyone's doing as much as they can. And it was really fun. And you got to learn a lot along the way. Definitely didn't see my career always in NGO or nonprofit. It definitely gave me a good experience at the gate from school. But from there, I actually started at an agency here in Ottawa called Banfield. It's a local integrated marketing agency. So they offer creative services, marketing strategy, digital marketing, you name it. And I joined there in about 2013, 2014 as a digital marketing strategist for the company. So back then, what that really meant was social media marketing strategy, digital analytics, PPC ads, right? Running that for a variety of clients in a bunch of sectors. And I think what's really cool about starting your career in agency is that you get this breadth of experience, right? You get to work on a ton of different projects with a ton of different people, and you get to work with, depending on what agency you're at, clients from a wide range of industries, right? So it really gets you some understanding of what you like, what you don't like, and maybe where your passion is. And it's interesting because that's exactly what happened to me. So when I was at Banfield, what I quickly learned at the time was data-informed marketing was something I found really interesting. I learned, especially through my time doing like PPC and digital analytics for clients' websites, how data could really level up strategy and decision-making and resource investment and all that kind of stuff. From there, the thing with agencies is you're often on short-term projects, right? So you work with a client for a couple months, you get from A to B, and then the client takes the project and maybe continues on. What you don't really get from that is this long-term ownership and accountability over an initiative. So as an individual in my career, I was really craving that after 2 years at the agency. I wanted to really own something and really see it through over the long term. So in 2015, I had the opportunity to join Shopify, which was maybe a month after they had IPO'd. So it was a really exciting time where the company was really scaling very quickly. And I spent almost 7 years at Shopify and playing a couple roles there throughout the organization. Mostly I was managing marketing teams between 5 to 12 people. The first role I had there was in content marketing. It actually supported our ecosystem department. So that's our partners and developers and affiliates. And I led and built out the content marketing team for that product line. What was really cool about that is it also gave me the opportunity and springboarded me into growth and growth marketing. Content marketing, has a little bit of everything in it where you're writing, you're doing positioning, but you also have to really deeply think about distribution and the feedback loops of what's working. And a lot of that applies to, the broader domain of growth and growth marketing. And so I was able to pivot a little bit more into a broader growth marketing role after about 2 years, where I was able to lead a bunch of technical crafts for the same department, including marketing automation, paid programs, content marketing, to name a few. And that was really exciting. That was really like my first experience running an integrated team. And then I had the opportunity to switch once again about 4 or 5 years into my time at Shopify to work with you on the growth programs team with Gustavo Sanchez. And I was leading the Small But Mighty acquisition program team. And that was a really exciting time for us because it was another stage of that company's growth. And we got to, do a lot of new things together for what was required at that stage. And then at the end of 2021, I believe, I ended up leaving Shopify. I was just looking for a new opportunity to challenge myself and landed at the company I'm at now, which is Buffer. So we are a social media and organic marketing platform for creators, entrepreneurs, and small to medium businesses. And I had the opportunity to join the team to develop the growth marketing discipline for Buffer, which has now also led into me leading also the product marketing team for the company as well. And that's where I am today at
Nice.
Buffersville.
That
Yeah.
sounds awesome. And yeah, it's crazy that you were at Shopify for 7 years. It sounds like a long time, but I feel like the company has gone through so many changes and growth during that time. And clearly you've had multiple roles while you were there too. So I'm sure it didn't feel like you were at the same place for all those 7 years.
Yeah, it's a really good point. It really did feel like with each of those roles that I had, it was almost like I was working at a slightly different company or a different version of the same company.
Yeah, makes sense. Cool. Well, you've obviously done a lot of really exciting marketing type of roles and most recently a lot in the growth space. Maybe, yeah, let's get into growth in general because I think when businesses and companies think about growth, it can seem like a really overwhelming umbrella of things that they should be doing. And you've obviously taken part in various streams of growth. So, how would you suggest businesses or companies think about growth and figure out what to prioritize for their business? Like, what are some of the frameworks or ways that they should be thinking about it to tackle the right things and not feel so overwhelmed by everything that you could be doing?
Yeah, it's a really great question. And I think you nailed it on the head where there is an overwhelmingly large amount of opportunity for many businesses, right, in this area of life cycle and growth marketing. What I always like to think of is it really comes down to like the unique situation of the business we're talking about. So what I mean by that is, on one hand, what stage of growth are we at in the product and the company's life cycle? Is this a startup that has just received Series A funding and they're still working towards product market fit? Is this a company that has IPO'd and now they're looking to scale up to that next level of growth? Or is this maybe even a turnaround situation where growth has been, like slowing for the past little bit and now we need to reignite some of our motions? That's the first question I always ask because I think depending on where your company and product is, you're going to likely want to invest differently. And I think the next most important question is what are your constraints? So I think that also is really important to understand as a business because especially as we're seeking growth, let's use acquisition growth as an example, something like capital budget to invest into paid marketing is sometimes a constraint for earlier stage companies that have a limited runway or have a limited amount of dollars to spend towards that particular channel. So starting from a place of understanding, hey, what is the unique situation of the business and brand that I'm working for? What are our constraints? Is really where I recommend anyone starts from because I think it's far too easy to say, hey, I worked over here at this company, like at Shopify, and I'm going to take my playbook, bring it over to Buffer, and it's going to work just as well as it did. That sounds great, and many times that does work. But the reality is, at least in my case, Shopify and Buffer are very different companies. They have very different situations, very different stages of growth and constraints. And so we deploy growth strategies very differently. So I always start there because I think that's like really important before we get into like tactics to just really understand what is the situation we're dealing with. When it comes down to actually getting the work done and starting to achieve growth, I usually always try to recommend that companies, the very first thing anyone should be doing is getting their data in order. What I always recommend and what we did at Buffer as soon as I joined is build that internally, model it internally in your data warehouse. And that investment will allow you to learn so much more about what's working, what's not working, and actually allow you to connect this kind of top of funnel pre-product data to actual product data, whether it's engagement data, activation data, monetization, so that you can make better decisions for your investments on the top funnel. And that underpins the whole strategy. And it's crazy to me, at least, how many businesses skip that step and just get right into let's start building the tactics out.
I love that. Yeah. So really taking time to one, understand your business, the goals, the constraints, and then building some foundational infrastructure for analytics because yeah, marketing is very data driven. And if you don't have those bases covered, then you're not going to be able to make the right strategic decisions and priorities.
100%. Yeah. And beyond the data foundations, when we're looking at kind of the acquisition opportunities, what I always recommend is a somewhat diversified portfolio of channels and programs. You don't want to go overly diversified that you're spreading yourself too thin, but you do want to place your bets across a couple areas to make sure you're not fully reliant on a single source of acquisition at any given moment. What I would recommend most businesses try to avoid is becoming so overly reliant on paid marketing to achieve their acquisition goals. The reason that I say this is that paid marketing is one of those programs where it can only scale based on a capital constraint I mentioned earlier.
Mm-hmm.
So you can get great results up until a certain point based on the limit of your budget. And until you get more budget, you've sort of reached the maximum of that. Sure, you can do tweaking and optimization, and we do a ton of that at Buffer to get the most out of our budget, but you will hit a ceiling at a certain point with that investment, and you can't scale into other channels or you can't scale into other markets. So
Right.
to really safeguard yourself and build a moat around your brand, that's where things like organic growth tactics and strategies come in, right? You have company generated content, user generated content growth. Those are really great moats to develop around your product, where either you're blogging and creating content yourself and distributing that through SEO and social, building that SEO footprint so you're getting organic traffic over time, or your users through their product usage are creating content for you, which opens a fully different distribution channel. On the other hand, as part of organic growth, something that we do at Buffer that's been a huge part of our strategy ever since the inception of the company is a community-led growth strategy. Not only does this allow you to create an awesome feedback loop for your product development, and that you can, release new features to these users, get their feedback, or at least work with them to build the next version of your product together, but some of these users, especially the ones who, are power users of your product, will eventually become evangelists for your product. And that's where you start to have this really powerful word of mouth flywheel that is, for Buffer at least, one of the largest ways that we've grown over time. I would always recommend that would be a great investment, especially for an earlier stage company who is a bit more constrained on some of the budget things. Yeah, exactly.
I love that. Yeah. And, it might require quite a bit of work up front, to your point, to actually build that community. But I think once the ball gets rolling, it has a bit of a snowball effect when the advocates and the referrals start to come through.
Exactly. Yeah.
That is a wealth of incredible knowledge and really helpful advice on the growth marketing side. I know you also do some work on the side around teaching and coaching and mentoring. So would love for you to share some of that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, you probably didn't know this, but when I was growing up, I actually wanted to be a high school teacher. I'm a huge history nerd, just like normally. I love learning about history. I'm a firm believer of like, you don't know where to go unless you learn where you came from. And so history can teach us so many lessons about, humanity and decision making and all of that. So I wanted to be a history teacher. I thought, this seems really exciting. I went to university to study history to do this. And then partway through my first year, I had this, student life crisis, let's call it, where I figured, you know what? I love history, but I don't love studying history as much in this university context. So I switched to business. And I think for me, that was probably one of the best decisions I could have made at the time, because it opened my career opportunities to go work at Banfield and Shopify and all of that. But I always still had this part of me that was like, well, I still feel like I want to teach. And my mom was a teacher growing up. So I think that's just part of my family and my upbringing, was being around someone in the education system. And what was interesting is, as I started to work at Shopify, I found that, and this is even true today, one of the most rewarding parts of my job is actually working and building and managing the team that I work with. Being able to coach more junior marketers through the lessons that you learn over time is really rewarding for me as an individual, being able to share things that I have learned. And so it felt natural for me to go and test this out a little bit. So I was lucky enough to get a great opportunity to teach a couple courses at a local community college here in Ottawa, called Algonquin College, in the marketing and brand marketing space. And that was really fun. I got to meet a lot of really inspiring, the future of marketing, let's call it. And that actually opened the doors for me to do a certification program at the University of Carleton, where I taught reputation marketing and content marketing. And then through that, I met the founders of a company called GiftBetter. So GiftBetter is this awesome company out of Ottawa run by two amazing female founders that is essentially trying to disrupt how we do, brand and employee gifting. And I was able to work with those two founders over their first year and help them, scale as they were bootstrapping their company. And I think, teaching and mentoring, there's a lot of similarities between them, in that you're able to give back and able to inspire and share ideas. And, for me, nothing feels more rewarding than to do that. And it's been a really, exciting time.
That's amazing. And I love that you make time for this. I'm curious, Simon, what goes into teaching at, let's say, Carleton University? So what is required of you as a professor to bring together for your students?
Yeah, for sure. So from a pure logistical perspective, it really depends on the state of the program. So you could come into a program, and some programs, they have all the content materials. It's all up to date. It's ready to go. In other programs, some things have gotten stale. Teachers have left, and part of the role is coming in and actually helping refresh, let's say, the content with new examples, mostly new examples, I'd say, because a lot of like the strategic stuff stays the same, right, at the end of the day, but that does take a little bit of effort. And for me, that's a really important part where if we can tie this to more recent real world examples, it sticks a little bit more in the student's head. So it's always worth it, even if you're doing a course the second time. Of course, you have to go and teach the course. So you need to be relatively comfortable doing public speaking and talking through presentations and all of that, answering questions. So that's probably the fun part is actually in the class with the students, talking with them, answering questions, doing workshops and stuff. And then, of course, you have what's probably, in my mind, the least fun part, if I'm being honest, which is the grading, the marking, and all of the extra logistics of getting everything set up in like an LMS system or anything like that. What I would say even more important than all of that, it's going to sound kind of cheesy, but is just having empathy. I think whether you're leading a team, you're mentoring a 0 to 1 founder, or you're teaching students, I think having empathy to understand their unique situations, their goals, their fears, ambitions, and committing to work on those together in a very authentic way is what I think makes great teachers distinct from good or okay teachers.
Love that. And yeah, it's incredible that you're doing that on the side with having obviously a full-time job. I'm curious to know, Simon, what does a full day in your life currently look like?
Good question. A little different depending on the day, but usually I start my day, I wake up, I'll have a smoothie, go to work, a typical thing, have my shower in the morning. My daytime ritual is usually I'll spend the first hour reviewing data, checking in on our dashboards. Then I'll use the rest of the time of that hour to catch up on Slack and email. Luckily at Buffer, we're not a very email heavy company, so it's mostly Slack, just getting caught up on any updates or direct messages I had. We are a globally distributed company, so my team that I manage is spread out across the world. And so oftentimes when I wake up, there are individuals who have left messages for me from the night before because they're working in APAC or somewhere in EMEA or something like that. So generally try to get all that out of the way. And then my goal is usually to not look at email or Slack till the end of the day to give me really focused time. Generally, there'll be a couple meetings throughout the day, whether they're one-on-ones with my direct reports, project sync, or we have, a weekly grooming meeting for our growth marketing team where we go through tickets and experiment queue and all of that. So get those out of the way usually. I'll generally block off 1 to 2 hours of my day every day just to get some heads down work, whether it's to think about, looking forward, like we just came out of the end of Q2. So a lot of that time was spent thinking about Q3, reflecting on Q2 and redoing those plans. When it's actually in the middle of the quarter, like we are now, that time is used to actually, get shit done. And then from there, if that usually will end up taking me to the end of the day, unless there's some extra meetings. And then I've been going to the gym a lot. So after work every day, I'll leave and I'll go to the gym. And it's become actually probably like my favorite part of the day. Lately, it creates this really nice separation of space between being at home working and then coming home afterwards to not work, right? I think that can often be a challenge for people working remotely is how do you make that separation of like, I'm in my house all day. And there's so much opportunity for work to bleed into your evening where going to the gym really helps like reset the rest of my night. And then, the rest of the night is free time and dinner and all that.
Amazing. Yeah. And it sounds like just with the remote work or the remote world that you're in with Buffer, you do have a lot of ownership of your day. You're really focused on managing your time, responding to those messages still in a timely way to make sure shit gets done, but doing it in a way that works with your schedule and your day. So I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Buffer's done a great job because of the fact that remote and distributed was part of that DNA of the company ever since inception. They've done a really good job of making, I think, remote work actually work.
Cool. Well, we are over halfway through the year now. Any plans for the rest of the year? Any goals?
Yeah, good question. Well, we have a lot of plans at Buffer in the next 6 months. So working with the team to just get through some of those priorities and help, bring those out to market. Personally, I have a couple of goals. I'm hoping to travel a bit more this year, the second half of the year. So definitely really excited about that. We'll be heading out to Japan, I think, in October, which should be really fun. I've never been out to Asia, so this will be the first time. And for me personally, like I mentioned, I'm on this sort of fitness journey a little bit. So I'm just like really committed to following that path for the rest of the year, getting deeper into it, getting into an even better routine than I am now. Um, it's just been a really surprisingly positive aspect of like my life lately. So I just want to continue down that. And long term, maybe thinking about leaving Ottawa eventually. I think having this exceptionally flexible remote opportunity makes you wonder, oh, should I still live here? I've lived in Ottawa my whole life. So some thought there about maybe moving out west potentially. I know that's what everyone in Ontario seems to be doing these days, but it's for good reason as well.
Yeah, and I feel like you're an outdoorsy person, so I can definitely see you living out west. Cool. Well, that pretty much wraps it up for the questions, the big ones at least. I do have some rapid fire for you, so let's jump
Let's
into
do it.
that.
Yeah, let's go.
What are some of your favorite food spots in Ottawa?
Oh, wow. Great question. So it's kind of a cheat because this is a Toronto spot that just opened in Ottawa, but we just got a first Daldon Hay location in Ottawa, which is Korean barbecue. And pretty much every time I go to Toronto, I try to go there because it's just really good. You get all the bonchons and everything. And so they just opened a spot in Somerset. We went last week with some friends and it was really great. Highly recommend that. And then I'm a big fan of this place called Heartbreakers. It's a pizza joint in Hindenburg. Really nice wood fire, flat pizza. My friend was the manager there. Kind of biased, I guess, but the pizza is really good. So I'd highly recommend that too.
Amazing. We'll have to check them out next time I'm there. Any podcasts or just forms of content that you're currently consuming or loving?
Yeah, so I'm always trying to consume content. I think, marketing and growth is always evolving, so it's really important to stay up to speed. A couple ones I will call out that have been my favorite lately. First and foremost, I will give a shout out to Reforge. I am a big Reforge fan. I just completed this year my third course with Reforge, which was the pricing and monetization course. It's just an awesome resource for anyone looking to scale in growth or product management or any of those sort of growth related disciplines. I've only recently gotten into podcasts. It's something that's I've always never stuck with me, but I think because now, I'm a homeowner in the suburbs. I do a lot of like yard work. So I put in my AirPods and I'll start to listen to podcasts. And lately, my favorite podcast is Lenny's podcast, is what it's called, which is a really great product focused podcast where, Lenny is interviewing a ton of product leaders from, the biggest and best product led growth companies. And they talk a lot about, their approaches to building product, building teams, developing growth engines. And it's a really great source of inspiration. And I just find that it's structured in a way that's like really consumable and digestible. And then my last suggestion is a newsletter. And it's actually someone's newsletter who you had on the show before, which is Kevin Endig's Growth Memo, is an incredible source of strategic thinking around organic growth. And I read it every time there's a new article that comes out. Kevin is a really smart guy. Definitely recommend subscribing if you haven't.
Yeah, Kevin is a content machine. Awesome. Okay, next question. You love traveling. I know you do. What's a favorite place that you've traveled to?
Ooh, that's a really tough question. So maybe like some recency bias because I just came back from Spain, but I will say the southern region of Spain, Andalusia, was an incredible experience when I was over there. It's very unique from the rest of the country in that I found the southern area of Spain felt more authentically Spanish than, let's say, the northern regions that felt a lot more, metropolitan. Like Barcelona is a very international city. But when you go down south in Spain to Granada, to Sevilla, to Malaga, it does feel different. It feels more authentic. There's also this really cool Middle Eastern Moorish influence in that area of the country because, going back to history, and obviously this is partly why I love it, there was a big conquest back in the day from Middle East, and a lot of that architecture and a lot of that cultural influence still exists today in southern Spain. And it's really, really cool to see that because it feels so distinct from anywhere else in the country.
I love Spain as well. What is a skill or hobby that you'd love to develop?
Yeah, that's great. I'm somewhat of a creative person. I don't think like that's necessarily my default. I'm definitely more, data pragmatic kind of guy, but I would love to be able to flex more creativity. I think design in general, like just UX design, product design really intrigues me. There's just something really interesting about the psychology behind design and how we influence people to do certain things in products. So for me, I would love to be able to just get into a more of a creative outlet like that, whether it's design for work or design for fun. That would be something that I wish, I picked up earlier in my life. But there's still time, I guess.
Yep, you're never too old. Okay, last question. Where do you get your inspiration from?
That's a great question. Yeah, I think, I mentioned professionally, I get inspired from a lot of these other thought leaders that I listen to. I think in my personal life, the biggest source of inspiration for me is my brother, Adam. So my brother Adam, I think you're aware, but he has a developmental disorder called Prader-Willi syndrome, which has, of course, created numerous challenges and opportunities for him in his life. And I think he has shown so much resilience and courage, and he is just an exceptional human being. He has so many significant day-to-day challenges, and he can be still so optimistic and still so ambitious, and wants to overcome his own personal barriers, that it helps put a lot of things in perspective for myself, and I think those around me, and those in my family as well. Having someone so close to me like my brother be the source of inspiration has just been, I think, something that shaped me as a human through my whole life, right? Because of course I've known him my whole life.
I love that. And you are honestly a great brother as well. And you're both very lucky to have each other.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I definitely feel that way.
Awesome. Okay, well, thanks so much, Simon, for all the wisdom that you shared, for being here, for taking time to do this. I had so much fun, as I always do, catching up with you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sammy. It was great to chat, and thanks for the awesome, insightful questions.